Hello and welcome to part 7 of my course, Build a Geothermal Greenhouse in Your Backyard. I'm Alex Smith, host of Radio EcoShock as broadcast on 100 non-profit radio stations in 4 countries. You can get the show free online at www.ecoshock.org. Even while I was sick, things have kept growing here with the lights set on automatic. I had to water once. Definitely new spinach growth happening here, and that was old spinach that I dug up out of the garden, so I'm hoping that when I bring some new spinach in from seed I'll get some serious growth. You can see the cilantro is doing okay down here, and that lettuce is starting to grow, and again that was really old lettuce, so it's nothing fantastic, but you'll notice there's no fan running in here, and that's because it's over 50 degrees in here. It's about 51 or 2. The fan comes on at about 49. And that's just from the rocks and from being down in this hole. I mean, it's not from the sun. All the curtains are closed. There's a little bit coming in from the ceiling, but I think that most of the heat right now is just coming up through these big tubes in the ground. That goes down 11 feet there, and there's another big tube there. And it's, you know, during the daylight it's warmed it up. So the secret is to hold this heat in here, and there's what those shutters look like on the inside. They're right outside the whole window. You can see that there's a silver lining to the foam that I put in there, and that will reflect light back into the greenhouse and also maybe a little bit of heat. But that really seals it up, so I'm not losing anything out of that window. I've still got a lot of work to do on the roof, but that's another story. I've got the wood fire going. It went from about 48 degrees to 60 degrees in 15-20 minutes in here, which is fabulous. Now, you may have noticed I made a change to this stove. I put a heavy metal grill above it. It's held on by 2 bolts that go right in the concrete wall. You can just use a common drill and a concrete bit, just a regular old household drill, and drill into the concrete. You pound in a outside casing with a hammer. It comes with the little bolts, and then you put the 2 bolts in, and that holds it on that side. On this side it's just resting on this little concrete pillar that I built beside the stove to stop people from walking into the stove and burning themselves. And I got that grate for free from a farmer's field, a friend of mine. And you know, this whole story of this project, I've got a 20-gallon water barrel on top of there full of water. It shows you the need for community when you're doing something like this, and talk to people about what you're doing, because I got the grate for free. It came in a larger sheet. It had to be cut down, and then this little angle bracket that sort of holds it against the concrete wall was welded on, and that little angle bracket that allows me to bolt it on, and the 2 holes were all drilled by a friend of mine who has just some metalworking equipment and some welding equipment, and he's into helping me and just into this project. And thank you, Gordy, for doing this. He did that for free. And you know, Kevin came up with the grate. Thanks, Kevin. And then this barrel, I had a 50-gallon barrel, but that would weigh 500 pounds, and it would be big, and it's just too much for this little greenhouse. So I found somebody who had this 20-gallon barrel, John, thank you, and traded him straight. I gave him my 50-gallon barrel, he gave me this 20-gallon barrel, and it had in it apricot kernel oil. Not sure why people use apricot kernel oil, but it's at least a natural product. And this barrel was very clean. I washed it out, but the water that came out of it was clean already. That water's sitting within about 6 inches of the stove top. It will get warm and hot as I keep this fire going. And then when I go to bed at night, if I'm running the fire at night, that will stay hot for quite a long time into the night. And whether it's hot or not, it will help to stabilize temperatures in the greenhouse, because you know, the water just does that. Many people have very large barrels to stabilize their greenhouses. I've got a very small greenhouse. I don't have room for those large barrels. It is 3 p.m. on January the 23rd. It's been very cloudy out and snowing, pretty mild out. It's minus 1.6 degrees C out there, so what, about 30 degrees Fahrenheit maybe, or a little bit less than that. So let's see, I put wood on this fire at 2 o'clock, so that's an hour ago, and it's pretty well burned out. There's a few coals left at the very back of the stove, but there's no flames. The fire is more or less over. I think I'll open that up a little bit just to get those coals burned out all the way. So I've got a heat gun here. I'm going to do a few measurements. I'll start with the stove door. And stove door is 100 degrees C. And we'll change that to Fahrenheit. Stove door is 206 degrees Fahrenheit. The bottom of the barrel of water, let's give that a shot, see what it is. It is 92 degrees Fahrenheit. The top, do a new shot of the top of that barrel, and it is 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's 12 degrees Fahrenheit between the bottom and top of the barrel. One presumes there's a similar difference to the water inside. Stays warm. Right now it's a very comfortable 72 degrees inside the greenhouse. I should have that on the thermometer here. 72 degrees Fahrenheit, about 24 or so C. There's some other interesting temperatures to look at. One would be the temperature of this block right behind the stove, so we'll do a reading of that in C, and it is 72 degrees C, 76 degrees C, somewhere in there. What is that in Fahrenheit? That's around 150 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty hot. And we'll try this block down in here also beside the stove, see what it is. It is almost 200 degrees, 195 degrees Fahrenheit. And so those blocks are really hot, and the barrel is around 90 degrees. Okay, it's 6 p.m. on January 23rd, and this is just an update on my first experiment with this barrel on top of the wood stove. It's 4 hours since I last put a piece of wood in the stove, and of course it's totally dead in there. Has been for some time, but it's 57 degrees Fahrenheit in here, and minus 1 degree centigrade outside, so that's 30 degrees Fahrenheit outside, so it's 27 degrees warmer in this greenhouse 4 hours after I put a piece of wood in that little stove. And the geothermal fan is not running, and of course it won't come on until it is at about 47 degrees or 49 degrees. Let's have a look at a few measurements and then I'll sign off on this. Here's the thermometer. Hope you can see that. It's at 57 degrees, as I say. So I'll do the bottom of the barrel there, and it's at 22 degrees centigrade. What's that in Fahrenheit? About 73 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty warm, you know, 4 hours later. Up at the top, it's also 74 degrees Fahrenheit. So the heat 23C. The heat has spread throughout the barrel, and it's continuing to radiate out into the greenhouse. Feels warm to the touch inside, so the barrel is definitely maintaining heat. How about our blocks down here? Let's have a look at that. We measured this block in behind, and it's at 26 degrees C or 78 degrees Fahrenheit. So that block is definitely holding its heat. And how about this block? What's the temperature there? It's 70 degrees approximately, 69 degrees Fahrenheit. So in general, as I say, we got about 58 degrees Fahrenheit difference between the outside and the inside. The geothermal fan's not running. We're probably getting a degree or two of heat from that LED light. Not much. I'd say the heat in this greenhouse is coming from those concrete blocks around the wood stove and from this barrel. Well, part of the whole project here is to see whether we can make things grow, not just stay alive, but grow in Canada in a cold winter. Well, we've just gone through a real test of that. It got down to minus 25 at night, and it only warmed up to about minus 15 during the daytime. That was due to a thing called sudden stratospheric warming, which put a whole warm blob of hot air over the Arctic where it shouldn't be. It was above freezing there in the dark in February, and split what would be normally the cold Arctic air and threw some of it into Europe and Eastern Europe, and some of it into Western North America. So after a very mild January where it was above zero every day, we got this super cold blast. So yes, you can grow your plants in Canada even during the cold blast. Here's what I did to get through that cold time. First of all, one of my primary sources of heat here are these metal halide lights, and I've got a 1,000 watt metal halide and a 600 watt metal halide over this little bunch. They throw a lot of heat in addition to a lot of really great light at 4 in the morning, so that just as the greenhouse was starting to get into its coldest period, these would come on and start warming it up to some degree. Now beyond that, what I'm trying to do is to do this for the least possible amount of energy, because first of all, I don't want to use more energy, and secondly, it costs me money. So to do that, I've got a ladder of equipment here. I'll just turn this fan off. And so the lights keep it warm. We just had a very sunny day. It's 70 degrees in here. It's just exactly at zero outside. The sun was pouring in through the roof. You might as well consider this a kind of wallopini at this point. I've got my insulated shutters over all of the glass on the walls, but the roof is still glass, and I got a lot of heat in through there today. At night, of course, that doesn't happen. So what happens here is that my cheapest form of heat, as you know from other videos, is this little camping stove, which you run that, and then this 20-gallon barrel of water heats up. Now, I just found a way to kind of fake measuring the temperature in that water barrel. This is a thermometer that's been ripped out of the little gauge that came in, cost like 10 bucks. And I put the marking on it starting at 30 degrees and going up to 120 degrees. What I'm doing right now is I'm just lowering it down into the water to see what it's at. Now I haven't had a fire here, so it'll be interesting to see what the water temperature is right now. And it is 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, about 75 degrees, so it's slightly warmer than the temperature of the greenhouse for some reason. I don't know why that is, but that's what it is. And that will help to moderate the temperature of the greenhouse as night comes. Now, a couple of nights I didn't feel like lighting a fire, or I wasn't here, so what happens then? Well, at 61 degrees, this heat pump comes on. Now, it's a portable air conditioner, but it's got a heat pump built into it. I could have set it you know, to come on at 70 degrees if I wanted to. And if I had more tropical style plants, or you pot blower growers, pot blowers, yeah, may want to have it warmer than I did, but I have it come on at 61 degrees, and that's the lowest that this thermostat on the machine will let me set it for anyway. So that's my first line of defense. The heat pump uses 20% of the energy to produce the same heat as an electric heater that you will buy. I've got it set on a timer here so that during that cold weather I had it running for half an hour, and then the power was turned off for about 4 or 5 minutes, just in case any ice formed on the fins of this. It gives it a chance just to stop for a minute, and that ice might melt off. And it has been working. I've had no problems with the fins icing up, and it has been keeping it nice and warm. But when it gets to be that cold, there's always a possibility that the heat pump won't do it. When the temperature gets to 47 degrees, that's when this geothermal heat pump comes on automatically. So it's like a ladder. Things fall down. They start off with the lights, or, well, really it starts off with the sun during the day, then the lights, then the heat pump, then at 47 degrees, which is pretty cold for some plants, this comes on, this big fan, and it comes on according to a setting on this thermostat over here. Now, why don't I set this to come on sooner than 47 degrees? Well, 47 is the most I can get out in February out of this. So if it's 55 degrees in here and I turn this on, I'm actually cooling the greenhouse down. So I'm only using this when things get really cold. I'm not using the geothermal as much as I thought I would as far as the fan goes. But then this gravel is 5 feet deep, and there's big pipes going down into the ground, and that comes out all the time, and I feel it sets a kind of warm base for in here. I'm getting 47 degree air at least filtering up through the gravel and coming up through those big ground pipes. So that helps keep the place warmer, and it makes it less work for things that require electricity to happen. Now, if there's a terrible thing happen, the fall backstage on my ladder of things is this little ceramic heater, which comes on at 35 degrees and turns itself off at 45 degrees using this pump. So I've got a ladder of things. How did it work out? Well, one night I forgot to plug the heat pump in, and it got down as cold as 34 degrees. That's the coldest it's been in this greenhouse. Everything was fine because the plants I've got growing here, I've got spinach, I've got lettuce, and it's a variety of lettuce that's used to the cold. And I keep these records of how things are going, you know, just as I'm walking by. I've got a thermostat that relays up to the house, and so I can be in the house. I've got the thermostat tucked back in here because I don't want the lights to shine on it, because that warms it up. So it's over there kind of in the shade away from the lights. And so I can keep track of the temperature outside from another thermometer and inside this greenhouse, and I can see how it's doing. For example, on Tuesday at 10:30 in the morning it was minus 15 centigrade, and it was 52 in the greenhouse at 10:30 in the morning, partly overcast, and that's just on the heat pump at that point. The geothermal would have turned off because it turns off at 47 degrees, otherwise it's just cooling the place. And it got up to about 59, even though it was minus 11 out during the daytime. So the next day I decided to light a fire, so at 6 a.m. I happened to be up, and it was minus 24 outside centigrade and 41 Fahrenheit in the greenhouse, pretty cool. So at 11:30 a.m. I lit a fire in that little stove, and it was minus 13 at that point, 58 in the greenhouse. An hour and a half later, minus 11 out, 82 in the greenhouse. So definitely that fire works. And I let the fire go out, but it did heat up the barrel, and I measured the temperature in the barrel, and it went to 100 degrees after that fire. So that took quite a while to cool down. It worked really well. But by 11 p.m. It was minus 14 outside, centigrade, 49 Fahrenheit in the greenhouse, and the geothermal would be turning on right about there, maybe 47. Pretty soon the geothermal turns on, and at that point, 11 p.m., the lights are off because I don't want to keep my neighbors up too much, and so I don't have the heat from the lights. So the geothermal comes on, and it's working with the heat pump and any air that's coming up through the gravel to keep the place warm. Now, in the coming spring, as soon as we get through this real cold period, and I think we're just about through it now, I will take the shutter off that southern wall and open up those curtains and let more and more of the sun come in. And then as it gets even warmer and the sun gets hotter, I'll take the shutters off the east and west walls, and this will become a greenhouse again. And as a month or two pass by, then the challenge is going to be, it's going to be too hot in here, and I will switch my regime of lighting from the metal halide lights to LEDs, which are much cooler. They'll save me on power bills. I won't need the lights as much because I'll have the sun, so I'll just have the lights to extend the growing hours into the later evening and starting them early in the morning, because I want at least 16 hours of light on these plants. Maybe 18 would be better. Things are growing. These plants are all growing from seed now. These aren't plants that I dug up in the fall and threw in here. These are growing. So it is working. This geothermal greenhouse is working.